Welcome. I'm José Woss, Legislative Manager for Justice Reform. Today, I want to talk to you about lobbying Congress for strong action to address police abuse that results in murder and violence against Black people, the militarization of the police, and legislation that begin to transform policing. Your lobbying at annual meeting for this legislation or these legislative measures could make all the difference. Although the House has passed legislation, neither the legislation itself nor any of the substantive provisions have passed in the Senate. We need a huge push now to put these particular federal policy initiatives on the agenda for Congress. I'm not optimistic we will pass legislation at the end of 2020, but I can assure you that these provisions will not even pass in 2021 unless we begin to do this lobbying work right after the elections. There are many different legislative priorities facing the new Congress. We have to make sure this is in front and center for lawmakers. FCNL was proud to stand with the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights as they put forth a strong letter outlining the challenges with policing in the US and the following recommendations for fixing them. Many of those recommendations were incorporated into H.R. 7120, the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, a bill that the House passed. We saw a much weaker bill, S. 3985, the Justice Act, proposed in the Senate. This legislation focused on studies and commissions and did very little to address the problem of police brutality in communities across the country. So we would like the Senate to pass either the Justice and Policing Act or pass component parts of that legislation in another bill. Those essential parts are as follows. Prohibits federal, state, and local law enforcement from racial, religious, and discriminatory policing, and mandates training on racial, religious, and discriminatory profiling for all law enforcement. Bans chokeholds, carotid holds, and no-knock warrants at the federal level and limits the transfer of military-grade equipment to state and local law enforcement. Mandates the use of dashboard cameras and body cameras for federal officers and requires state and local law enforcement to use existing federal funds to ensure the use of police body cameras. Establishes a national police misconduct registry to prevent problematic officers who are fired or leave on one agency from moving to another jurisdiction without any accountability. Amends federal criminal statute from willfulness to a recklessness standard to successfully identify and prosecute police misconduct. Reforms qualified immunity so that individuals are not barred from recovering damages from when police violate their constitutional rights. We can get something done, and whomever you are lobbying, we need to bring this call into their office. Here's my breakdown of what we need. If you are lobbying a member of the Senate Republican caucus, try to get them to share their position on the different parts of the Justice and Policing Act and ask them to support those pieces. Ask them if they'll support the Justice and Policing Act. If you're lobbying a member of the Senate Democrats, ask them to continue to push for passage of the Justice and Policing Act. Thank them for their support if they have supported the legislation, and make sure that they commit to making it a priority in the first 100 days of the next Congress. If you're lobbying a member of the House Democrats, do the same. Thank them if they've supported the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, and also ask them to keep up the pressure and support the legislation in the first 100 days of the next Congress. If you're lobbying a member of the House Republicans, ask them their thoughts on the different components of the Justice and Policing Act. See if you can get their support on those components, and also ask them to support the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. America needed police reform before November 22nd, 2014, when Tamir Rice was shot in his front yard and while playing with a toy gun. America still needed police reform before March 13th, 2020, when Breonna Taylor was killed, and still needs reform on May 25th, 2020, when George Floyd was killed when a police officer knelt on his neck for more than 8 minutes. We've got to make sure that Congress acts, and with you, we can make that happen. Thank you.